Having been a sailing instructor for over 40 years, there is one skill of sailing that I think is really overlooked. In sailing schools, the skill is usually only touched on in preference to other aspects of sailing like parts of the boat, points of sail, tacks and jibes, and so on. Now, don't get me wrong, that's all good stuff. But when the skill we are going to talk about is touched on in a class setting, it often leaves the new sailor even more confused than ever. And I also think that this skill is the most critical of all. I'll even call it an instinct that the new sailor will greatly benefit from learning first before anything else. I think for those of us who've been sailing for a while, we take this skill for granted and just assume that everyone already has it. No wonder why the struggling continues. But stay tuned. I'm going to show you why this matters and how to fix it. The good thing is that it's easy enough to be learned by even young children out for their first sail on mom's lap. And best of all, you don't really even need a boat to explore its facets. Hi and welcome back to Sailing Team Tally Ho, where my crew asks me really good questions and I do my best to research and answer them. This time my crew asked me, what's the single most important thing you learned when you first learned to sail as a kid? It actually didn't take me long to think of what that was, but I think the crew was a little surprised. I don't think it was quite what they expected. And that is, the most important thing I learned back then was the instinct of understanding the wind. By that, I mean more than just understanding things like direction and speed, but also being able to instinctually sense everything about it and react to its subtle changes, even anticipating what it does long before it even fills the sails. I like to think of it like a sculptor who is artistically contemplating the veins and defects of their stone as they chisel. I'll make a guarantee that nurturing this instinct in the long term is worth it. Now, I get why sailing schools often don't cover this topic thoroughly. In a school setting, there is such a short time to cover such a huge set of checkbox items. We often only see this briefly in a diagram or whiteboard drawing, and boom, the class is over. But this approach can lead us to believe that we should treat it like how we drive our car on the highway, with painted lines on roads and predictable speeds. And as you know already, the wind, which after all is our fuel on a sailboat, just doesn't work that way. Today, I'm going to show you 3 new ways to think about the wind, and along with it, an evolutionary framework to achieve mastery that has worked well for me. If you stick this video out, I think you'll come to the same realization that most of us do about this. First, I think it's vital to understand that when we see arrows and drawings on a whiteboard, that these are models of what the wind does, not really how it acts in nature. The famous physicist, Niels Bohr, I think perhaps says it best. When he's talking about his early models of the atom, he said, "All models are wrong, but some are useful." Diagrams and arrows are certainly useful, but they are, however, wrong. The last time I checked, there were no pointy-tipped arrows flying around in the sky. The wind is just not that simplistic. I'll be showing you this in a way that I've been teaching my students for many years with the ancient Japanese martial arts concept of shu, ha, and ri. That is, that we first learn to the level of shu, and that we observe and copy what we're taught, but we don't really understand why. Second is ha, which is when we understand why we do what we've learned and are able to perform independently within the rules we were taught. But ultimately, we strive to achieve ri, where we understand the subject so well that we developed our own instinct, We no longer need to refer to the rules we were taught. We have evolved beyond them. I'll put a link into the comments for more on shu, ha, and ri. But before I continue, if you like this content, please click the like and subscribe. It really helps me to keep these going. I do appreciate it. Thank you. Let's get into it. When I take brand new sailors out for the first time, the first question I ask them is, point to me where you think the wind is coming from. And you know what? Usually only about half are able to get it even roughly right. There is no shame in that, though. This whole thing about using just the air as fuel is quite challenging to many, especially if you're an adult learner. So you're in good company. But you'll catch on, and even if you think you're already okay at it, you'll get a lot better. I'm going to show you some learning exercises to go along with this, and I think that they'll help you go to the higher levels of ha and ri. Well, doing our first learning exercise is best on a boat, of course. If you don't have a boat, no problem. Go get a stick about the length of a chopstick and tie either a piece of old recording tape or yarn to the end. Stand in place and hold this out in front of you, into the wind, and notice how the wind feels on your face and neck when you rotate yourself and look at where the telltale goes. Practice pointing where you now know where the wind actually is. For now, we're doing this when we're just standing in place. When we're moving, as in sailing of course, that's another game altogether that we'll talk about later. See if you can align with the wind and your telltale when you have your eyes closed. When you can, I think you are arriving at shu. Observe and copy. Okay, now you can open your eyes again. This may seem trivially simple, but I think you'll be surprised with how you can develop an increased awareness to even slight shifts with practice. Pay attention to things in everyday life that you've probably ignored in the past, like the direction smokestacks trail off or flags wave. Are you able to zoom in on that direction right away? And the bonus question is, from what you see, what point of sail would that put you on from the direction you are facing at the moment? You're working your way to ha and ri. You'll use this feeling when you're on the helm of your new boat as you steer through the tacks or respond to puffs and shifts of the wind. You'll arrive at ha much quicker. But what about ri? When you master this, what does that look like? Well, let me tell you, when I'm a guide for sight-impaired sailors, you'd be amazed with how well they can do with no vision at all, entirely by feel. They don't even need the telltales on the sails. Their lack of a sense of sight is compensated for with an acute instinct for the wind direction. Still not convinced that this is important? Envision yourself on your first offshore race as a skipper on a dark and heavy seas night. The boat is surfing down unseen waves with the spinnaker up in near uncontrolled jibe conditions. You've been on the helm for hours and are totally exhausted, and you desperately need to turn over the helm to a crew member before you start making catastrophic errors in judgment. Even if you have all of the best wind instruments money can buy, would you be able to get your critically needed sleep below if you thought that this crew member wasn't at a solid ha? Yeah, same with me. I wouldn't either. Now let's switch from just feeling the wind to understanding what it does. And to begin that discussion, I'd like to say one word: honey. While so many of us are taught that the wind behaves like lines on a page, my experience is that a better comparison is the three-dimensional qualities of honey. Like honey, it flows and shapes itself to objects in its path, both seen and unseen, as we'll see in a little bit. Let's experiment with how you can discover this on your journey to Ha. On a windy day, just stick out your hand in front of you and point your whole hand directly into the wind and then shift it from one side to the other. Curve it like a sail would curve and feel the differences in pressure, or lack thereof, between one side of your hand to the other. You are essentially turning your hand into a miniature sail, and you are feeling the action of how the sail works personally. No pointing arrows or computer simulations needed. When you're at home, and sneak a few moments to play with your food, drip the honey around a curved object and see how it flows around things. And also observe the drips if the angle is too sharp. You'll reflect on this when you later learn about sail trim and shape. This honey analogy also moves up to a larger scale. The wind interacts like honey in that it piles up or is blocked by things like hills and trees, and especially points of land and bays. If you can internalize how the wind acts like honey around these land features, you'll be way ahead of the game on the race course. But it also interacts with unseen things like low and high pressure areas, temperature differences between land and water, on the much larger scale of the weather. That honey flowing quality goes all the way up the ladder. The last thing I'd like to cover is a sort of capstone to the others, and it has to do with the character of the wind. Again, from our line drawings, we may get the initial impression that setting sails to the wind is a sort of set it and forget it exercise. Nothing could be further from the truth. The reality is that we can never be absolutely sure about what we'll get, even from moment to moment. Remember when I said that sailing a boat is definitely not like driving a car on the highway? Well, what I do compare it to is much more like riding a horse. A horse has its own mind as to what it wants to do. With a twitch of their ears, they indicate that they're interested in something else besides what you want them to do. It's up to you to control that with the reins. You can have a mild horse, or a bucking bronco, and everything in between. The wind is likewise a capricious thing. It changes constantly, but it does have some patterns that you will learn to control on your journey to Ha and Ri. And I say journey because as you begin to arrive at Ri, you'll realize that attaining it is a lifelong process that is never actually fully achieved, and few excel at. The ones that do sometimes wear one of these. One of my favorite quotes on this subject is from the famous author and sailor H.A. Callahan. He said, "You can never learn it all. The art of sailing is as old as mankind, and as new as the cat's paws you see scurrying down from windward." So I hope this video helps you decide to take some of these ideas and nurture your own journey to Ri as a lifetime aspiration.